All right, so we are just describing the relationship between the angles. So 1 and 5 are what type of angles?
Corresponding.
Corresponding, very good. 2 is 2 and 7. Alternate exterior, good. Different sides of the transversal outside of the two lines. 3 and 6. Alternate interior, very good. 8 and 4. Corresponding again, good. 1 and 8. Alternate exterior, good. And 3 and 5. Same side interior. Wonderful. So yesterday was basically just a vocab lesson. It seems like you guys are doing just fine with those vocab words. Today what we're going to learn is how these things are related when you have a special set of lines. So any questions on the relationships before we move on to today's material? Alright, today we're doing section 3-4. I told you that it's going to be a special types of lines that are being crossed by this transversal. Here you can see what type of lines those are. We're going to talk about parallel lines that have a transversal. And the objective is to find congruent angles formed when a transversal cuts parallel lines. So, first let's just review what parallel lines are. Parallel lines are lines that lie in the same plane and never intersect. In the diagram, you will be able to tell that two lines are parallel because of these things. These little triangles indicate that these lines are parallel. Any questions on that idea?
No.
Should be something that seems pretty basic by now. You don't need to write this down either. This says, generally speaking, the angle pair relationships that we learned yesterday, the corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, same side interior, do not really tell us a whole lot about the information unless, here's the important part, the lines being intersected by the transversal are parallel. So if it looks like this, nothing special is going on. If it looks like this and it has little triangles, this one should have those little triangles, there's a lot of special relationships that are formed. Any questions so far? Here's where I want you to start writing. When parallel lines are being intersected by a transversal, and then we're going to list some things that become true.
So no vocabulary?
I guess technically what we write next could be considered vocabulary, but the notes aren't super long today. It's just like 4 bullet points that we're going to make after this, and then we'll go right into examples. Yesterday was a lot more writing, just getting the definitions of those relationships down. So here's the first thing that happens when you have parallel lines being intersected by a transversal. Just write, oops, hold on. Just write this part. Right here. Alright? These angles that we called corresponding angles yesterday, if the lines are parallel, now you know that all those corresponding angles are congruent. So A and A are the same, B and B are the same, D and D are the same, C and C are the same. You already have this picture in your notes from yesterday, so you do not need to write this down. All I want you to write down is this statement. Corresponding angles are congruent. We're going to have 4 very similar statements by the end. Alright, statement number 2. Alternate interior angles are congruent. Again, you should have a very similar diagram from yesterday, so you don't need to worry about the picture. But you now know that alternate interior angles are congruent. So A and A would be exactly the same, B and B would be exactly the same if these lines are parallel. Alright, statement number 3. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. So again, if I know these lines are parallel, A and A, those are alternate exterior angles. They would be congruent. B and B are alternate exterior angles, so they would be congruent. The fourth and final statement is a little different. Instead of being congruent, we know that same side interior angles are supplementary. What does it mean to be supplementary? They add to 180. So if you're still unsure what supplementary means, make yourself a little note that those angles should add together to give you 180. So if you do B plus B, you should get 180. A plus A, you should get 180. All right, so I want to do one diagram that sums up all the things we just talked about. So draw this with your pencil, and then you should all have two markers. We're going to use those markers to indicate which angles are congruent. So I'm going to start with a purple on mine. And make sure you label that they're parallel. This only works when the lines that are being intersected are parallel. Alright, let's say I gave you some measure for this angle. It doesn't matter what it is. But let's just say, you know this angle. Alright, mark it in purple. You know what it is. Now, the first thing we learned is that corresponding angles are congruent. The angle corresponding with this angle is this angle right here. So whatever this one is, this is going to be the same. So mark the corresponding angle in the same way. The next thing we learned is that alternate interior angles are congruent. So if this one has some certain measure, this one has the exact same measure. So you can now mark that one with that same color. The third thing we talked about was alternate exterior angles are the same. So if this one is some measure that we're indicating in purple, this would be the same because they're alternate exterior. Which makes sense because these are vertical angles and so are these. So all of those four angles will be exactly the same thing. Any questions so far? You can put that marker down. Now, there will be another measure. Mark that with the other color. And again, we know the corresponding angle to that angle will have the same measure. The alternate interior angle will have the same measure. The alternate exterior angle will have the same measure. So, basically you're going to have two different angles, the purple angles and the red angles, or whatever your two colors are. Okay? What do you know about these two different types of angles? Let's say we took one of the red angles and one of the purple angles and we added them together. What would we get? This is the last thing you learned. Same side interior are what? Same side interior are, they're not congruent. This is the last thing you wrote down. Supplementary. So if you add those two angles together, you should get 180. So all I would have to give you is one angle, and you could find all other 8 angles. Or all the other 7 angles for 8 total. All right? All these angles are either congruent or supplementary to one another. Kind of neat. Any questions before we look at some examples? All right, you can hold on to the markers. I'll come get them in a second. All right, here's our first 3 examples. So go ahead and write these down. So the first thing we're going to do is establish the relationship. Are they corresponding? Same side interior, alternate exterior. Then we're going to decide what the relationship is in order to find the missing angle. So what type of angles are these? They're corresponding angles. What do we know about corresponding angles? They're congruent. So if the angle given is 70, angle 3 is also 70. What type of angles are these? It's actually the same as these. They're in the same position. So are these. So are these, actually. They're all what type of angles? What did you guys say on this? Corresponding. See how they're all in the same position? Alright, so corresponding angles are congruent. So if this one's 141, what's this one? 141. Good. Again, we have corresponding angles. So if this one's a right angle, what's this one? A right angle. And what's the measure of a right angle? 90 degrees. Great. What are your questions on these 3? Okay, what type of angles do we have in number 4?
Is it alternate? No.
It's one of the alternates. Are they inside the lines or outside the lines?
Inside.
Inside. So they're alternate interior angles. What do we know about alternate interior angles? They're congruent. So if this one is 59, what's the measure of angle 3? 59. Great. What type of angles do we have in number 5? Alternate exterior. So what do we know about the measure of alternate exterior? They're also congruent. So 110 degrees over here. What's angle 4? 110 degrees. Wonderful. Number 6 is kind of hard to tell, but they're inside the lines and they're on different sides of the transversal. So what type are these? You got half of it. Interior. What type of interior? Alternate interior angles. What do we know about alternate interior angles? They're congruent. So if this guy is 167, what's angle 5? 167. Great. Any questions on the first 3? All right. What type of angles do we have on number 7? Same side interior. What do we know about same side interior? They're not congruent. This is the only one that isn't congruent, actually. These are supplementary. So if this one's 135, how am I going to find angle 3? Well, I could call this like x, right? And say that like x plus 135 equals 180.
So you got to subtract.
Yeah, you got to subtract. You can set up an equation if you want, or you can just say, well, I know I need 180 minus 135, and then that'll be the new angle. What is that angle? What? .45 degrees. Wonderful. So again, you can set up an equation, make this some unknown variable like x. X plus 135 would have to be 180. Or you can just say, well, I know that these need to be 180, so I can do 180 minus 135. That would give me my answer. Either way is fine. Any questions on 7? It's a little different than the rest of them. All right, number 8. What is this one? Yeah, corresponding, and this one's 90 degrees, so what's angle 4? 90. Corresponding angles are congruent. Great. What type of angles do we have over here? Same side interior. What do I know about same side interior? Yeah, they're supplementary, so you got to subtract. You can set up an equation if you want, or you can just go right into the subtraction. What do you get? Ideas? It's the same as this, but you'll have 100 extra. 145, good. Any questions? Alright, so same type of setup. Now you just have to solve an equation, but you're going to use the same information. Be careful on this one. It kind of looks like they're talking about this angle up here, but the arrow is actually pointing to this little guy right here. So what type of angles are these? They're congruent because they're corresponding. Good. So congruent means the same. So set them equal to one another. And then solve for your x. So I need to add 5 first. So you get that 7x equals 70. And then what's x? 10. Wonderful. Can we do 11 in the same way? No, why not? Because these are same side interior. Same side interior are not congruent. They're what? Supplementary. So you need to now add them to get 180. Now this is where it gets a little tricky because we have like terms on the left side of the equal sign. So you want to start by doing 142 minus 11, which gives us 131 plus x equals 180. Then what? What is it? Oh, you can't see, it's behind that hand. I'll write it up here. What is x going to equal when you do 180 minus 131? 49. So in that one, x is 49. Great. Any questions? All right. Take a look at 1 through 4. These are true-false questions, so let's see if we can work through them as a group. Number 1 says, angle 1 is congruent to angle 6 by the same side interior angles theorem. So are 1 and 6 same side interior? That's false. They're actually same side exterior. Number 2, angle 2 is congruent to angle 7 by alternate interior angles theorem. So are those alternate interior angles? Yes, so that one's true. Number 3, angle 3 is congruent to angle 7 by alternate exterior angle theorem. So are 3 and 7 alternate exteriors? False. They are congruent, but it's because they're corresponding. And then number 4, the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180 by the same side interior angle theorem. True, they are same side interior angles, so their measure should add to 180. Alright, you are responsible for the rest of these. Be careful on that last one. You actually have 2 transversals on that one, so be careful and let me know if you have any questions.